Okay, welcome everybody. Let's get started on sort of, if this is your first time, the norms and expectations around these office hours. So as you settle in, you can type in your name, your role. You can type in questions into the chat box as well, although we highly encourage you to just unmute yourself and ask, because that's what we're here for. So let's review really quickly, if anyone didn't see it beforehand, that we are going to be using GoToWebinar, obviously, and this is what you essentially need in order to function in this webinar. You just have to unmute yourself for this one. Typically, we do a raise hand feature, but because the audience is small, we don't have to worry about that. And just a reminder that this is not a formal training, so we are not necessarily going to be presenting to you a whole lot of information that isn't already available. So some ideas that we have for today's webinar are 3-year-old assessment, high quality pre-K, commissioner's list of approved tools for pre-K, and ECDS submission. And so as a reminder, this office hours is all about serving 3. So it's the first one that's different from the others that we have, which were all about assessment, although you're of course welcome to ask those questions as well. Tamala Olsby was supposed to be the person who was going to be hosting the webinar, but she was unavailable today. She had an emergency, so Mary and I will be taking over, as well as Scott Bogner. So feel free to unmute and ask away. And if you're sort of unsure of which questions might be, you know, the best to ask for this particular webinar, you can also check out our new FAQs all about high quality pre-K. Those are on our website, and I'll go ahead and present them now as well. So we can pretty much cover any of these high quality pre-K components if you want to look a little bit about, look at some of the district reports and how those are formulated, questions about curriculum, questions about student progress monitoring. We have a lot of answers on that, so you are welcome to just go ahead and ask.
Why don't you share, Natalie, the Educator Resources on the TEA page that shows where the commissioner's list is and all that, the approved kindergarten curriculum?
Yeah, so this can be found, thank you, Mary, this can be found on the main TEA page. If you click on academics, you can hover into the early childhood education section. Data-driven instruction is the website that we're usually in, but Educator Resources is a great place to start. And just like Mary said, there you can find all the commissioner-approved pre-kindergarten and kindergarten assessment instruments that are good until the end of this year. For kindergarten, it's a little bit of a different timeline. And then if you click on here where it says ECE resources, we have this really awesome way to filter. So if you'd like to, you know, maybe check out, okay, I want a downloadable resource, and I kind of want it to be all about high quality early learning components, you can find them all there, which is really helpful. And we also did something very similar for our data-driven instruction page as well. If you click on the best practices in professional development section, it's filtered in the same way. So if you want to look for a professional learning webinar or video, and you want to really think about, you know, okay, well, what do they all just have? You can click any, or you can be specific. You can apply those, and all those videos will pop up, which includes some of the videos that have been recorded with these office hours as well.
Hey, Natalie, one of the big updates to the FAQs was related to the PreK 3 assessment. Could you maybe share that one?
Sure. You said the videos?
No,
Or
the
resources?
FAQs, the pre-K3 and the requirements around assessing pre-K3s in the FAQs.
Okay, so there it is.
So I think it's number 10 and number 11. Is that correct, Scott? That were the recent updates?
Yeah,
on
they're a little ways
monitoring?
down. They're in student progress monitoring, yeah. There you go.
It's 10 and 11. And it's under how often should progress monitoring be done?
Does that help you, Teresa? Did you have any questions about 10 and 11 in specific?
No, I'm sorry. I was having audio issues. No, I think it clarifies that what is required is the submission of 4-year-old eligible students who are being, what should be submitted in ECDS is if the district is assessing 3-year-olds using a tool from the commissioner list. But going back to number 10, it's not required. It's just that they should if they're sitting in that high quality pre-K classroom with eligible 4-year-olds. So I
Yes.
appreciate the clarification of 10
Yeah.
and 12, or yeah, number 10 and number 11.
It does
So
say in
it's,
11.
I have a question. I'm sorry to interrupt. So it's really up to the district if they want to test the 3-year-old students or not?
Not quite. If your pre-K 3 students are in a blended setting where progress monitoring is required, so and it is required in your pre-K 4 settings, the teacher should implement a progress monitoring tool that's appropriate for the 3s. So if you're using a tool with your 4-year-old students, but you do have 3-year-old students in there as well, then you'll want to make sure it's appropriate for them too, because sometimes they're not, depending on the tool.
So what about classrooms that are 100% pure 3-year-old students?
So if you do use, that's where it kind of clarifies it here too. If you do use a commissioner approved tool, then you must submit that data into ECDS if you have that standalone pre-K 3 class. So let's say if you have a pre-K 3's class and you use Circle or teaching strategies, then you would be submitting that data. You must submit that data.
No, okay. Thank you for clarifying.
Yeah. But of course you don't have to. Go ahead, Mary.
I was going to say, in Circle, they have approaches to learning and social and emotional learning that are checklists for the teachers to fill out that are helpful to show growth. The thing with the 3-year-olds is some of them are normed to, for them as they turn 4, but it will show up that it's not age appropriate and they won't score it against a benchmark, but you can still see by the raw score progress made by the child at BOY to MOY and then to the end of the year assessment.
Yes, in our district, we implement Circle assessment for both age groups, but I have heard other districts say that they don't test the 3-year-old students using Circle assessment. And we were under the impression that we had to test all students attending pre-kindergarten in order to be in compliance with HB3. So that is why I was asking this question, because it was brought up, and I want to make sure that we had clarification.
Yeah, the bottom line with the 3s is in the mixed class, the pre-K 3s should be assessed the same way as the 4s, unless it is not developmentally appropriate, then it's at the teacher's discretion.
Okay, thank you.
Teacher or the district discretion, right, Scott?
Yeah, it doesn't specify. It just says if deemed developmentally inappropriate.
Yeah, but a district can choose a different assessment that's not on the list that would help the teacher to actually see progress.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Thank you, Mary Ellen. That is what I needed clarified. Thank you.
Yeah.
Okay, I'm glad we got those questions, and we're very excited to have this information on the updated FAQs. So share it with your friends. You know, that link isn't going to go anywhere. It is definitely housed on the website, and updates will be made to it as needed, although we don't foresee any in the near future. Is there another question? So if you're unsure of, something that you've been thinking about, but you're not quite sure how to ask, you're more than welcome to chat in the box as well. You can add something in there too, and send that message to us privately if you'd like as well. And typically, if there's not a whole lot of questions, we sometimes end early, although I don't want to end too early if people have some lingering thoughts or confusions around some of the requirements. So just wanted to let you all know too that, should there not be too many questions, we're also happy to end early so you can get your time back.
And while these are theme-based, and this one being all about serving the pre-K 3s, we're certainly welcome, or we're certainly open to any other questions you have related to early childhood in general that we can help you with. So don't feel like you have to restrict it to pre-K 3 questions.
I have a question. So there have been many questions about students, specifically the 3-year-olds, if they should be potty trained and verbal in order to attend public school. In the past, I know that last year this matter was brought up by many principals because we in our district decided to expand. We conducted an expansion of our pre-K program, and a lot of 3-year-old students were enrolled, and so principals were pretty much they were unaware of all the information about this issue, and they were having all different problems with kids that were not potty trained. Is there anything in writing, anything that we can provide administrators as far as potty training and the students being verbal in order to start attending pre-K in public schools?
Neither is an eligibility requirement, potty training or the being verbal, so that would not be a disqualifying factor. I mean, you don't have to be potty trained to be eligible is what I'm saying. So you, just like in kindergarten, you have to accept students, and in pre-K, if they are eligible and they're not potty trained or they're not verbal, then you have to accept them.
Mary Ellen,
that's what I thought.
There used to be a frequently asked question on the early childhood website that addressed that, and I noticed that frequently asked questions were moved around. If I search for it, I can still find that very specific question. So whoever asked, I mean TEA, I don't know if that question is still out there on your website, but it was addressed in a frequently asked question for general early childhood questions about potty training.
Yeah, it was addressed. It shouldn't still be live. I was actually looking for it to see if I could find any sort of statutory reference to back it up. I'll look for that.
Thank you. Yes, I appreciate that, because last year I know that we were looking for something in writing that we could pass along principals and administrators, and we just couldn't find anything. And we came up with some kind of, memo with suggestions that we thought were appropriate. But other than that, we just couldn't provide any more information about this issue.
I don't know that there is a statutory reference to it other than it is not an eligibility requirement that the child has to be potty trained.
Yeah, this issue does come up, there's a lot of questions around it, specifically if teachers have not worked with that age group before and feel a little unfamiliar, or principals are really new to having very, very young children in their schools. So Tamala is going to be hosting an ECE office hours all about classroom style potty training. That might be helpful if folks are kind of feeling overwhelmed, if children are coming back and maybe they're in pull-ups. But again, it's kind of a community effort there, working with families. But again, that it's not a disqualifier if they're coming to school and not potty trained.
And that's going to be November 16th, it looks like.
Mm-hmm. And
yep,
there's registration space.
I'm sorry, I've included the link to where it is addressed on a frequently asked question for early childhood at the bottom of the page.
Thank you.
So the district who wants that information.
Is that in the chat section here? I'm sorry,
yes.
I don't know how to work this in order to see the chat for some reason.
That's okay. I've copied the link. We do have a little bit, like you mentioned, we do have a little bit of movement, internal movement with our early childhood page. Scott is working very hard on trying to make it more organized. So things that you may have seen in one place may disappear and pop up in another. So just be aware of that moving forward. We're not going to try to confuse you a whole lot, but we do need to establish some organization to all of our resources.
Is there a way that anybody could send these on an email, or at least the link? Because I honestly cannot find that link.
Sure. And I can show you how to get there if you.
Okay, perfect.
Yeah, so let's say you're on the main TEA website and you go to academics.
I'm going to do it as you speak.
Yeah, and it's if you hover on that academics, the drop down will appear. You can go to the early childhood section, and there you'll find Educator Resources. And from there, all the FAQs will be listed as well. It'll be under related content.
And that FAQ link should be on most of the pages. Any of the pages that have a sidebar, I tried to put that FAQ link in at the top so people can get to it easily.
Okay, and you're saying that the potty training part is on the FAQs?
Well, the potty training webinar is going to happen on November 16th, and you can find the registration for that on our data-driven instruction page. And so that one, I'll take you there from the beginning. If you go to academics, again, under early childhood, you'll click on data-driven instruction. It's the same place where you found this GoToWebinar link. It's under best practices in professional development. And there it is right on the bottom.
Okay.
I did find the old language for the potty training question, and it referenced statute, but it just referenced the eligibility standard. So basically saying it's not one of the eligibility requirements. So, yeah.
And remember that when you have a child that needs potty training, there needs to be a school-wide plan to support that teacher. If it's just one teacher and 18 kids in a pre-K4 class, they're going to need support in setting up a place for them to change the child, how to, some systems for potty training the child, which Tamala will talk about in this webinar that's coming up. I always liked when I was teaching and I would get kids that needed potty training, I always liked to start with taking data, because if a child can't stay dry less than an hour, then there's no sense to start potty training. The child's not ready, just like a child's not ready if a child's not ready to cut, then you use activities for strengthening their fingers, and like Play-Doh or any number of fine motor tweezers, sorting, those kinds of things that you do. And you have to think of potty training as being a developmental skill as well. And there are steps that you can take to get that done. And that's one thing Tamala is going to really center on in November.
Okay, sounds good. Yeah, I think that we last year we referenced a lot of that information as far as, you know, development being a developmental skill and what are some things that teachers can do on campuses, but still I feel like we still encounter a lot of questions regarding that issue, especially because with the expansion, a lot of the elementary campuses decided to open classrooms, and they probably had not the best setting as far as not having a bathroom inside the classroom.
Right.
So they were not prepared for that, and it became a big safety issue and concern around the campus. So
Well,
go ahead.
Well, I was just going to say, that's what you have to have a school-wide plan. A teacher can't do this by herself. Now, if the teacher has an assistant, that really helps, but not all pre-K teachers have TAs. So it's a unique situation, but we really want to emphasize what's best for the child. And it's not a skill they have to be there. And what's best for the child is to be in school, probably, if they are at risk for another reason. And so it's important, and it's important from the principal on down to figure out how the school is going to help support this teacher in getting this done.
And there's quite a few professional resources that I used as a toddler teacher. One of the most helpful ones is actually called ECEE. It's the Early Childhood Environment Rating Scale. You certainly don't have to use this, but I really saw a lot of value in looking at high quality ways of setting up my classroom, because it was originally set up for my changing table to be looking out the window, and how on earth am I supposed to keep an eye on my kids that are behind me? So it really helps, you know, develop your plan, making sure you have line of sight, making sure that they're, you know, even just the procedures for diaper changing are extensive. You want to make sure you're wearing gloves and you have a diaper genie right next to you, so you're not walking across the classroom with a dirty diaper. So there's a lot to consider, which is why we're having a whole office hours about it on November 16th. But yes, I found this extremely helpful working with early childhood programs, just so they have it. And I think I saw somebody, oh, go ahead.
I'm sorry. I just, to pretty much close this, I just wanted to ask about the pull-ups. Is that something that we could, you know, allow in schools? Or because I've seen children using pull-ups for sure. So is there something that says that students that are using pull-ups are not allowed in public schools? Or okay,
no,
perfect.
They may use.
Okay, that's what I thought.
Yeah, because you'll have children who wear pull-ups until kindergarten or sometimes later because something else is going on. So pull-ups is, you know, I see it a lot like a diaper. You want to make sure it's clean. You want to check it. You want to make sure the child is able to tell you when they're wet. The only issue with pull-ups is that sometimes they don't feel as wet as they would normally feel in a normal diaper. So there should be, like Mary said, when you talk about systems, is if you have children, or like you asked earlier, what if you have a nonverbal child? Are they admitted into the 3's program? First, absolutely yes. It's not a disqualifier. But if you do have a nonverbal child in a pull-up, you'll want to create some systems in place to know who's tracking dirty diapers, essentially, and when children need to be changed, because we can't let them sit in a dirty diaper all day. So it's important.
And I think that was another concern from our teachers. They were asking, you know, well, am I supposed to change diapers? Am I allowed to change diapers? That really opened a whole, you know, a big can of worms. And we wanted to make sure that we guided our teachers in the right direction with that one as well.
Yeah, well, that's where your plan comes in. That's so important. What Natalie was talking about is what supplies are needed. If the child is ready to be potty trained, are you going to use a potty training chair that somebody's going to have to purchase? And so I would also include the parent in on this plan, because if the child is ready to be potty trained, then you're going to want the parent to be following up at home with that as well. And so it's real important to have this planning meeting, and everybody in the whole school, the nurse and the, you know, to give that teacher support, because this is not something most pre-K classrooms are set up for. But if you have a child that needs it, then you need to set it up. Plus, I would add, as Natalie was saying, taking data is important, because if you have a nonverbal child that's in a pull-up, this child may need, there may be something else going on and may need other services that you would have to go through the RTI process to consider what steps you take and how you document it.
Yeah, and it is the responsibility of the teacher to be changing diapers. That is part of it's essentially just like making sure you have enough crayons in your classroom. You are checking diapers if you have children who are not potty trained.
Thank you.
Absolutely. If they have any of those questions, like, am I allowed to? That's not the first time I've heard it. I've heard that a lot for teachers who are very new to working with very young children. You can absolutely send them our way. You can give them our email, which is earlychildhoodeducation@tea.texas.gov. And we can certainly answer those questions for them over the phone or even just, in an email as well.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, great questions.
Oh, can you please put that contact information again so I can take a screenshot?
Oh, sure. No problem.
Great, thank you.
And I don't want to forget that somebody did ask a question about PreK assessment windows, and I just want to make sure that they get their question answered. So that too is on our data-driven instruction website. So this page is currently the best practices page. If you go into requirements, we have the pre-kindergarten requirements. We added that language distinguishing between the 3s and 4s, who gets assessed and who may not. But underneath is a really helpful pre-kindergarten calendar, and I'll zoom in so you can see. And so essentially, you will need to be you will need to be submitting that data into ECDS no later than June 17th. But keep in mind that the window to start uploading this data is open on November 9th. Of course, that's really early to be submitting a lot of data at once. So if you'd like, you can even just put in your BOY data, your beginning of year data. And then towards June, you enter your end of year data into ECDS. So it's not this big load of data that you're worried about getting in right at the deadline. And I think something that is important to note here is, depending on your assessment tool as well, you'll really want to encourage teachers to put their data in the system. Oftentimes teachers are still using, which is a great method, the paper and pencil observation method, and then they like to analyze their data, closer to June when they put it all in. Maybe try to discourage that practice and ask them, you know what, let's try to analyze our data sooner. If you have a pocketbook full of notes, let's go in at BOY and start filling out what's going on in that assessment tool. And that way it's not as overwhelming for teachers or the person who's doing the data submission at the end of the year. I'm just going to check if there's any other questions that popped in. And of course, feel free to unmute if you do have more questions as well. All right. Just going to go down the list and make sure everyone is still unmuted in case any new people joined. Okay, so you are all unmuted still. Okay, good. Let me get back to the other page here. So the pre-kindergarten requirements are there with that calendar, as well as the tool selection guide. But keep in mind, we have the same thing for the kindergarten calendar as well, which is really helpful. as well as first and second grade. Of course, the difference between second grade is that they were not assessed within the first 20 days. That 20-day rule does not apply to second graders, but this is what the first grade calendar looks like. And if you need to, it's in calendar form as a visual, but we also typed everything out in text for you and differentiated between the requirements and those best practices as well. Okay, and if that's all the questions we have, we can stick around for a little while longer. If there are no more questions, you are welcome to distance yourself. But if you do have some items that are still coming up, or they come up for you a little bit later, feel free to email us. We are happy to respond with hopefully a good answer for you.